Assalamu alaikum. Right now, the hot topic seems to be that Jada Pinkett Smith and Spike Lee are boycotting the Oscars because apparently there's been no black actors nominated in the whole history of the Oscars. I guess this is only the umpteenth time that has happened. So I don't know why we're just choosing this year to do this little boycott. I mean, who needs to seek white validation? So let's talk about white validation a little bit. I have some things to say about white validation. White validation is so strong. You grow up as a person of color seeking it automatically without even realizing it. It's so subtle and yet so powerful. White validation is the number one achievement of white supremacy. Because what more could you want from an oppressed people than for them to validate you and your ways of oppression without them even knowing it? That's the funny slash sad slash ironic part of this whole dynamic of systemic racism, right? Like, not only do we suffer racism at the hands of white people and white supremacy and white-oriented systems, but then we also seek the validation of white people, the very oppressors, the very beneficiaries of racism. I was actually reading an assignment for my public health class about racial inequities in maternal health outcomes. And it talked about how there's not only fewer deaths in white mothers, but it actually contributes to something that enhances their health too. So it actually perpetuates better health. This is stuff that has been proven and proven and proven over and over again. And yet people, just disregard it. So I was walking, I was going to the subway today. Subway arrived and then it just stood there. And I was like, okay, when's the subway going to open? Once the doors opened, I was around a group of women of color. And so this white man, the literal embodiment of white privilege, actually let on a black woman ahead of him first. Even though, he technically had, the place in line to get in first. And then it was his turn to get on, obviously. But he didn't get on. He actually indicated that he wanted me to go on the train first. And so I was just like, oh, wow, a white guy who actually understands his privilege? Or maybe I'm just reading into it. I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead. I mouthed thank you to him. Maybe I had a really gleeful thank you because I'm just so not used to that. I almost just automatically expect white men to not accommodate me. Actually, funny enough, while I was on the subway later on today, I was the first person in line to get out the door, and there was no one else near me. The whole car was practically empty. Anyway, this white man, he just darted from nowhere, and he shoved past me, and he actually ended up getting off the subway car, before I even stepped foot out the doors. Even though I was I was right here, and the doors were right here in front of me. So I really should have been the first one. I don't even know where the heck he came from. He just darted. Right when he did that, I was like, yep, white entitlement, yet again. So much for that experience earlier this morning, where I was just like, oh wow, white man, And so anyways, back to that experience, I was just thinking, after he did that on the train, I spent a good 20 minutes thinking, why was I so happy that a white man gave me a space on the train, Maybe it's because it's such an uncommon occurrence. Maybe because it was unexpected. Maybe because there is a social code where white men just do not do things like that. And on that note, maybe it's because it's been scientifically proven that white males do not give women of color their way. There's been the study that actually reports that on a sidewalk where there were these white males standing, and there was people passing around them and by them and things like that. The white males did not flinch when there was a woman of color that needed to be accommodated. Like she needed to move past them or something like that. They didn't even move, right? They just stood in place like a little statue. Like, and it's just like, okay. Yep, I've experienced that. And you'll notice it too. If you're a woman of color, I mean, if you haven't noticed it already, now you'll probably notice it. And guess what? Guess who the one demographic was that they do actually accommodate and move? Other white males. Yep. You know, when another white male goes and walks in front of him or whatever, apparently it's time to move and give them their way, their rightful way. Anyways, so this all gets back to what I was thinking about. I was thinking, why do I even, why am I so happy that this white guy gave me, the go-ahead for him and basically sacrificed his little place in line for a little brown person here, who's just been beat by the system and whatnot. And I think that it's really sad that I even have to be in a place where I appreciate that, right? I mean, think of it this way. If you're a woman, you know how it feels to really feel sexism, right? Like, when a man respects your worth, or respects you in general, when a man truly respects you and treats you with what they call chivalry or whatever, I mean, just when a man just isn't a dick, you almost are just wow, you're so surprised, you're so amazed. You almost want to just call them the most amazing man on earth, even if they aren't, just because of the sheer fact that there was the absence of sexism. So just because there was the absence of sexism, that already elevates the guy. We don't know who he is, right? Just because he didn't treat you in a sexist manner doesn't mean that he's not a rude person or a cranky driver or something like that, And we tend to, as oppressed people, whether it's you're a minority or a woman, in terms of racism and sexism, we tend to elevate these people for no reason. There's no reason to be thank you to a guy who actually sees your worth. There's no reason to say thank you for that. The fact that we have to say thank you as women for that is so problematic. It's so super problematic. It's not only is it problematic, but it shows something about our society. It shows something about our culture, the way we value one sex over another, the way we elevate male bodies. It's almost as if we're in this emotionally abusive relationship with men in general. As women, we almost just are always at the whim of men, and we're always kind of trying to please them in the most subtle ways without even realizing it. Whether it's with wearing makeup or wearing nice clothes. I mean, really, why do you do those things? Why? Is it really for yourself? Because if it was, then you wouldn't have the energy to do that every single day, would you? I mean, it just really gets to me because it's really sad when we as a society, as people, right? When we as people, as women, okay, first of all, when we as women have to just go worship the man because he was so nice to me. Oh, he was treating me so nicely, blah, blah, blah. And then you talk to your girlfriends or whatever, talk about your latest guy crush or whatever, and they're all oh, he's so nice, blah, blah, blah. Girl, if you are impressed that a guy is nice to you, not only do you have low standards for yourself and you don't value yourself, you just don't know a thing about sexism. You don't. Because it should be the standard. It should be the standard that a man respects a woman. That should be a given, right? That should be a given. shouldn't have to say that. I should not have to say that. And, you know, what should impress us is if the man goes the extra mile, right? Like being nice to a woman, being courteous to a woman, giving up your seat on the subway, or, you know, like respecting her in general, talking to her in a very calm manner and tone, approaching her and her body with respect and dignity, and allowing her to have dignity and flourish in her dignity. That's what being a man should be all about. What we have made men all about is, oh, as long as he's, you know, decent, that's where we start off from. We literally have lowered the standards as a society, and it's not our fault. It's patriarchy's fault. I mean, it's not women's fault. It's the fault of patriarchy, where patriarchy has worked in such subtle ways, right, that it makes us as women lower our standards for men, and to be like, wow, I'll just accept, you know, a decent guy. You know, not all guys are nice. Most of them are jerks. So I'll keep my standards low. That way, you know, I can just have a decent guy. And if he doesn't treat me right or whatever, he doesn't value my you know, he doesn't respect me or value me, or like I should deserve as just a basic element of my existence as a woman and a human being, then we have come to have such low standards for our men. And that is sad. And it just proves that sexism is alive and flourishing. And in the same way, racism works the same way, right? The same way white people have made it such that we are able to look at white people and not even realize the subtle ways in which white supremacy has basically enslaved us to seek white validation, white people's validation, and to basically expect very little of white people in terms of holding themselves accountable. Just like any woman would want a man to hold himself accountable for being a jerk, every person of color should hold white people accountable for being jerks, for being unaware of their white privilege and not doing anything about it. That's just how it should work, right? And the way that society has gone on for so long with these systemic levels of oppression, whether it's through patriarchy or white supremacy, manifesting as both racism and sexism, respectively, is that those systems have penetrated so deeply into us as people, as human beings, that we no longer are able to even identify red flags when they're right in front of us. This is symptomatic of an issue in the Muslim community in particular, right? This white validation, we have it all over in our Muslim community. We as Muslims, being a religious minority in this country, are just like, oh wow, whenever our religion is acknowledged, just even acknowledged, not even like straight up accommodated, right? Like just acknowledged. We're just like, oh my God, that person said something about Islam and it was a good thing. Like, oh my God, did you see that video that George Bush posted about how Islam is a peaceful religion? Ah! Okay, so George Bush thinks Islam is a peaceful religion. Great! Now we can have all white people think that, right? Because George Bush said it. Not just that. It's like Muslims are so desperate to seek white validation that, like, we're willing to give up our basic tenets of religion, like praying, wherever we are entitled to pray, because of white validation. We don't want to do anything that wouldn't please white people. We don't want to do anything as Muslims that would make white people uncomfortable. So many girls that I know who are spiritually practicing as Muslims don't want to wear a hijab because it'll make other people uncomfortable that they're expressing themselves and their religion. Basically, we are having to literally give up our identities to accommodate the feelings and thoughts of white people who are essentially racist against us. I mean, Muslim girls are always like, oh, I don't want to wear hijab because it's going to affect my chances at getting a job, or I'm going to be treated differently at school, or my friends are going to go away, or, I'm just so afraid of how society is going to view me. That's all code for white supremacy. All of that is seeking white validation. So there's this new thing that came out, or is going to come out. It's a Curious George book, and it says Curious George learns about Ramadan. I saw all these moms, like I'm a part of a mom group on Facebook. They're all Muslim moms. They were going berserk. They were going nuts. They were like, oh my God, there's this Curious George came out with like a Muslim themed book. Oh my God, I'm getting it for my kids. Oh my God. And I was just like, we have plenty of nice Islamic books that are already being established, that have already been published, and mashallah, they're very successful books. I know about Newer Comics has started like a comic for Muslim youth. There's also been that Colors book. I forgot, it was like Ramadan and Festival of Lights or something like that. There have been tons, actually, and I can't think of them all, but there's been tons of Muslim authors who not only create children's books, but also, literature, like Muslim literature, that is not being valued, right? Because we have grown up, as Americans, at least I have grown up, only being able to read about white characters, only seeing white characters in movies that are prominent. And if there are any people of color, they are characters in the background, and they're not developed. They don't have full personalities. They don't have 3 dimensions to them. They're just one-dimensional, and often spew racial stereotypes that further marginalize us people of color. So it just becomes really problematic, because when we do it at a Muslim level, it takes on a whole new understanding of internalized oppression. Because the Muslim community, my goodness, there is not a single Muslim out there who was born into this religion who wasn't colonized by some sort of white power. And maybe I can think of like Spanish Muslims back in the 1400s or something. And even then, that's like, they were mixed with, I believe, the Arabs, right? Like, it was when the Islamic civilization had reached Granada and Andalusia, So and even Eastern Europeans who are technically white-skinned, right? But they're not white, and Western Europeans and other white supremacist countries like, France and Germany would never recognize Eastern Europeans as white people, right? So even they have not been free from colonization. Like Bosnians, Albanians, Turks have all been, hit by the power of white supremacy, of Western European supremacy. It's like only been a handful of countries that have literally completely like demolished the structures of people of color in the whole world. 5 countries dominating the whole world. The United Kingdom, France, Portugal, Spain, Germany. So that's my talk on white validation and how problematic it is, not only as women of color, but also as Muslims, and also about how sexism and racism have very similar qualities, and that it's very important for us as people of color to start noticing problematic stuff when it happens. Because we can't work on anything if we don't even see it as a problem, right? I'm not an expert on this by any means. I am still learning myself. And the litmus test that I use to basically understand racism is the framework and lens of sexism, because I can more easily identify sexism and sexism as a system, but also interpersonal sexism, because I've experienced it so much as a woman, and because feminism has been really good at teaching us how to unlearn patriarchy. Feminism has been the key to my female awakening. But for racism, we were never given any frameworks as people of color, or even tools and skills to really recognize where racism happens and how to unlearn it. And so I'm going on this journey with everyone else, and I really hope you all will join me as I continue to talk about racism and how pervasive it is in both our societies, but also in our everyday lives as people of color. So inshallah, God willing, I hope to see you all soon in the next video. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.